Hi, boys and girls. This is Grandma Sheila, and I'm here to tell you another Christmas story. Our story's called A Christmas Story. That doesn't tell you a lot, does it? But it takes place in Germany. Outside, it was storming like mad. The snow was coming down in just tons and tons of snow. Matter of fact, there was so much coming down that in the little cottage of Mr. Struve's, there was so much snow that it was getting dark inside. Well, on a bench right in front of the living room window sat a little boy named Andres. And he was intently looking at all those snowflakes. He was so excited. They were coming this way, the wind was blowing him that way, and then back again and up and down. It was snowing outside. But as he sat there, his face put on a perplexed look, and he said, "Mother, Mother." And Mother came out of the kitchen, wiping her hands on her apron. And she looked at little Andres. He said, "Oh, Mother, it's so stormy outside. The little angels won't get to come for Christmas." Mother looked at him and she smiled gently and she said, "Now don't worry. The angels can fly." So they could fly right through that soft snow. He kind of sighed with relief. They can fly. Oh, then they can come. They can be here for Christmas. But he kept looking outside, and the storm was getting worse. And then he thought of something. He reached out and he grabbed a hold of his mother's apron, and he said, "Mother, Mother, I would very much like a little Christmas tree for Christmas. Do you think I can have one?" Well, Mother, she just stood there for a few minutes. How could she answer that? You know, for the last few years, her husband, Mr. Struve, he had been very ill, and he'd been in the hospital numerous times, and all their savings had gone to pay those medical bills, and he was still sick, too sick to work in the mine where he generally worked. Last year, Mother had moved her geranium plant, which was big. She had moved it out into the living room. As a secret surprise to the kids, she had decorated it like a Christmas tree, so they had had a tree. But this year, even the geranium had died. She had nothing in the house to make a tree out of. And the area where they lived, there were no forests there. It was a plain. Then in the background, there was a frail voice, the voice of the father, Mr. Stroh's. He was sitting by that stove, trying to keep warm. And he said, "Andres, do you not have the heavenly Lord Jesus? Have you asked him for a little Christmas tree? You should ask him. Maybe he'll choose to give you one." Andres, he hadn't thought of that. So he quickly scooted down off that bench. You know, he wasn't very big. And he scooted into the bedroom. And he went over in the corner. And he knelt down where so many times he had seen his father kneel and talk to God about their difficulties. And he asked Jesus for a little Christmas tree. After that, every so often he'd scoot in and ask Jesus. Mother, when she saw him go off to pray, she reached down and she pulled up the corner of her apron and she wiped her eyes where the tears were starting to come. It was hard, but they had much to be thankful for. While Mother was busy in the kitchen, it wasn't too long till there was the clatter of wooden shoes coming up the steps onto the porch. And then Mother heard all the voices of her 4 other children. She had 5. And those kids were so excited, they came flying in the door and started to rush over to where her father was. And then Mother saw them. And she came out and she scooted them right back out the door onto the porch. And she said, "You can't let all the damp and cold come in. Get the snow off of you." So they each dusted all the snow off of each other. They had been playing in that snow all the way home from school. It was on their heads, on their hats, on their coats, and on their boots. So they stomped their boots and they dusted off the snow off of all of them. And then they came in. They took their happy voices to the table and they all sat down. And Father had greeted them all. And then they were quiet, expectantly waiting for Mother to bring their supper. Well, it wasn't long till Mother came out carrying a big pan, and the kids could smell and see that Mother had made baked potatoes. She set it in the very center of the table, and those potatoes constituted their whole meal. There was nothing else. Mother had cut them all up so that there were 5 portions of baked potatoes. Then everybody bowed their heads. These children were not complaining. They were thankful for those potatoes. They bowed their heads and they prayed, thanking God for all the blessings that He gave them every day and for those potatoes. They were glad to even have those potatoes. There had been times since Father had been sick when there wasn't even a dried up piece of bread in their house to eat. So they were glad for the potatoes, and they ate every smidget of them because nothing could be wasted. In a large house, a Tudor house, there lived another family. We're not told their name. They had a big, beautiful home, and they had 6 children that lived there. Well, in their house, you couldn't even hear the wind of that storm outside because there was a big roaring fire in their big tile furnace, and everything was warm. There was a lovely lamp hanging down over the table, giving a warm glow, and all the children were gathered around the dining room table. It was obvious that they were busy making preparations for Christmas. There was a whole stack of beautiful colored paper, and in the very center of the table was a huge pile of what was going to be decorations. And those were all sweet treats. There was gingerbread men that were all frosted to perfection. There was stars. There There was a Christmas trees, there was bells, and they were all frosted and beautiful with little holes in the top with a little cord of yarn on each one of them. Well, this family had decided that they wanted to give some Christmas trees to some of the poorer families in their village. So that's what the kids were doing with Mother's help. Mother would show them how to cut out of that paper different things and how to fold them and glue them just right so they would be Christmas ornaments. Well, they were tickled with doing that, and they had their scissors and they were snipping this way and that way, and little pieces of the paper were falling on the table. And when they got done, after they folded it just so, they were beautiful ornaments. Well, sitting at the end of the table was little Trudykin. Trudykin she wasn't a baby anymore, but she would seem like a baby to you and I. And she was sitting there. She wanted to help too. She stuck out her chubby little hands and she gathered up all those little snippets of paper that had fallen off the bigger kids' projects. And she was gathering them all up into a pile, and her little mind was working. And she started sorting them out. She was helping. And she made a pile of some of them. And she said, hearts. Then she moved them around. And she said, I's going to give them to the little angels on Christmas. And her big brother, Kurt, said, well, he kind of giggled. How are you going to get them to the little angels? And she said, with the wind. I throw them in the wind, and the wind take them to the little angels. But Kurt, being the oldest, and he thought the smartest, looked at her and said, they won't get there. They'll fall back to the ground. The earth's pull pulls them down. They won't get there. Do you know? And he started to say, do you know? Hans Peter, he taught me that the earth has pull. Isn't it so, Mama? Well, Hans Peter was their foreman there on the farm. He basically ran the farm, and the kids thought that he knew everything. Little Trudykin, she interrupted, and she said, then the little baby Jesus, he won't get the heart. She looked back down at those hearts, and she heard something behind her. It was the nanny. And she was so busy reflecting on what she was going to do with those hearts and how she was going to get them to the little angels that when she turned around and she saw the nanny, she stopped. She knew she didn't dare run and hide because when bedtime came, you couldn't get away from the nanny. Well, the nanny came over and looked down and she picked her up in her arms and she started to carry her over to her mommy to kiss her goodnight. And little Trudykin, she reached up and she pointed at her chest and she said, I have one more heart in here, and it will go to baby Jesus. It's his. And then she corrected herself. She said, a piece of it will be for him. And then she reached up her chubby little arms to her mommy and she said, but the rest of it is for you, Mommy. And she wrapped her arms around her mummy's neck, and Mommy kissed her goodnight. And up the stairs she went to the nursery with the nanny. Well, the kids were still busy making those ornaments for the little trees. And the only sound of that storm outside was when the piles of fluffy snow that gathered on the frames of those windows fell down in soft puffs. Poof. Well, Kurt was looking outside and he said, you know, this snow's going to be really good for Christmas playing. And his eldest sister said, oh dear, the lake, it's as smooth as a mirror right now. The snow will ruin it. I wanted to go skating. And Kurt, he looked at her. Girls. Then the next youngest sister said, and I wished for a pair of ice skates. And she kind of pouted. Well, then Kurt, always the smart one, said, what do you guys think? That just because you don't want it, the snow's going to stop outside? Of course it's not going to stop. It's almost Christmas. You guys just don't know how to have fun in it. Besides, Hans Peter says that the snow is good for the grain fields. Isn't that right, Mother? Mother had to agree. She had looked down and she said, I have a wonderful idea. Let's all sing some Christmas carols. And the girls all agreed. They said, yes, let's sing Christmas carols. That'll get us in the spirit of Christmas. So they started singing all the beautiful carols, Silent Night, and Oh, Come All Ye Faithful, Joy to the World, and Little Bitty Trudykin. As she was going up the stairs with the nanny, she heard them singing. Now, she liked to sing too, but she didn't always sing the words of the songs they were singing. And all of a sudden, they heard a little voice going in the distance. Oh, Christmas tree, oh, Christmas tree. Right in the middle of Joy to the World. Well, the kids didn't mind, and neither did Mother. While they were still singing, Kurt said, Mom, about the Christmas trees. Do you know that Hans Peter told me that the Stroves family is really, really poor right now? Could we give them a Christmas tree this year? That's what they were working on, was the decorations for the little Christmas trees that they were going to deliver on Christmas Eve to the families that were less fortunate than they were. Oh, Mother, she said, oh, Kurt, I wished you'd told me sooner. I only ordered 6 little Christmas trees, and I have families to give them all to. We don't have another one to give. Oh, I'm so sorry. I would have loved to give them a Christmas tree. She said, I wish there was a place that we could just chop one down. But they lived on a plain, and the Christmas trees, the forest was far away. I'm sorry. Well, the kids continued with their preparations. The next morning, there was a big bustling noise outside, and Kurt yelled, "The Christmas trees have been delivered! The Christmas trees are here!" So the whole family, all 6 kids and Mom, they rushed outside, and sure enough, here came the delivery man with the Christmas trees. And little bitty Trudikin, she looked out there, and when she got on the porch, she wasn't so sure anymore, because that big delivery man, he had on an old stocking hat, and on top of it was snow, and he had a big beard, and hanging off of the beard, it was so cold out there that there was icicles hanging all off of his beard. She took one look at him, and she turned around and she ran behind the door. And then she stood there and she peeked out. Well, the first tree to come off was their Christmas tree. It was big and full and tall for that big house. And then there was that whole pile of little Christmas trees. Well, as the man brought them, the kids started counting. 1, 2, 3. Each one, when he came up on the porch with it, they had to count it. 4, 5, 6. And then everybody stopped. They knew Mother had said that she ordered 6 Christmas trees. But there, leaning against that last little tree, was another almost shy little tree, standing there leaning against all the others. And Mother said, "I know I ordered 6 Christmas trees, 6 little trees. This must have been an oversight by the man. I didn't order 7, but isn't it wonderful? Now we'll have a tree for the Stroves." Well, everybody was excited about that. And they went in to set all those little trees up and to set their big tree up. All those little trees, they put it into a container so they would stand up. And then the children took all the decorations that they had made the day before, and they decorated those trees. First came all the paper chains and the popcorn and the cranberries. Then they put on all the paper ornaments that they had made, and little bitty foil ornaments, and little bitty candles to light. And all those Christmas cookies hung all over the tree, just like they were ornaments, waiting for little hands to pick them off and devour them. Well, that evening was Christmas Eve. The big house was a bustle, because Christmas Eve was when they were going to deliver those little Christmas trees. But back in the Strove's house, the children were all standing in the kitchen, watching them prepare their simple supper. You know, it was going to be kind of special anyway, because it was Christmas supper. And they were very, very thankful. And they had just heard Father thanking Jesus for his love to them. And they were all so thankful. They were thankful for the warm stove. They were thankful for the walls of their houses and the windows that they could see the beautiful snow falling. They were thankful for clothes and for a warm bed. And they were thankful that God had sent his son Jesus. Well, when they were all at the table to eat that dinner, Mother said, and I would really like to read to you what she said, because she said it so well. Outside, you know, the bells of Christmas were ringing. Matter of fact, those big bells in the church were pealing out, "O Holy Night." It was beautiful. This is what Mother said. Each home, people everywhere were approaching the Christmas celebration in their own particular way. Some found the highlight of Christmas in that elaborate holiday meal. But oh my, alas, the food disappeared too fast. Others viewed the sharing of their presents as the most exciting thing of Christmas. But once again, those presents were opened, and oh, how poor the hearts of those people were. But whoever looked up with gladness and hope to the Son of God, who became man for our sake, and which exchanged love for love, these were the people who celebrated a joyous Christmas, whatever their outward circumstances may have been. They always had a joyful Christmas. The last group she talked about was what the Stroves family was all about. They didn't need huge holiday meals. They didn't need piles and piles of presents. They had a joyous Christmas because of Jesus. While they were finishing up that supper, outside they heard a commotion. Then they heard muffled footsteps on the porch, and they heard whispering voices. Mother, she got up and she said, "You children stay right here. I'll go see what this is." To the front door, and there stood 6 children of all different sizes, holding a beautifully decorated Christmas tree. Mother couldn't believe it. She looked up at the mother. She knew her, and she knew who these children belonged to. And they quietly brought that tree and set it in the middle of the room. And then Andrea's mother told the children and that other mother about little Andres' prayer for his very own Christmas tree. She couldn't help but have tears falling down. God had heard that little voice. She didn't want to keep the children waiting, so she rushed back in the other room. "Come in, children, come see what we have." And when they got in, they looked in wonder at that beautifully decorated Christmas tree. They looked with watering mouths at those gorgeous Christmas cookies. And then the children all began to sing. And little Andres, he was the last one to come in. When the other children had got up to rush to see, he didn't need to rush to see. He knew that it had to be his widow Christmas tree, and he expected to see Jesus bringing it. He looked in and he heard those voices singing. They sounded like little angels, but he didn't see any angels, and he didn't see Jesus. But there in the middle of the room was that Christmas tree. He knew that Jesus would send it to him. He believed that he would. That other mother, the mother of those 6 singing children, she knelt down in front of Andreas and she whispered in his ear. She said, "Jesus had them chop this tree just for you. And then he told us to deliver it to you. Merry Christmas, Andres." And all the children said, "Merry Christmas." You know, it's God listens. The voices of little tiny children. I can hear him up in heaven going, "Go quickly, angels. and answer that prayer of that believing child. Thank you, boys and girls. I hope you all have a Merry Christmas and God bless you all. Bye bye.